Hi, Frank. Welcome to the Builder's Mind podcast.
Hey, Jay, how's it going?
It's going well. I mean, I wanted to have you in the pod for quite a while, but you're quite a busy man, going after building and trying to hit, new ARR milestones. So I'm sure also so many of my audience, they already know you, but it will be nice to know who is Frank and how did you end up at all this building world?
Yeah, so Frank is a Latvian dude, comes from a small town called Ventspils. And I moved to Game when I was 16, and then I worked for a bunch of tech companies called Google, SimilarWeb, BlackRock, gazillions of companies, SaaS, tech, typically frontline sales. And then in my last gig, I led a sales team of about 50. And then at that point, essentially, it was growth at all costs, which was a few years ago. And I understood that, companies, not just myself back then, but also gazillions of other companies, and still there's many companies that do that today, they scale at essentially still at all costs. That means you're plowing a lot of headcount just to make sure you're hitting your pipeline revenue targets. And I thought that was broken as a concept. Hence, a couple of years ago, I found two co-founders here in Vilnius, Lithuania, through Y Combinator. It's a matchmaking platform. And we decided to put an end to this, as in help companies build sales pipeline. So meaning really top of the funnel stuff, and do that with the least headcount possible, which I think is is what everybody's sort of really going after. Besides that, we want to do what we call with the highest probability. So using what we call large data lake behind the scenes to unlock significant efficiencies. And that's something that we'll be starting to do actually later this year. Now, the main sort of real problem that we're solving, if you look at your financial statements in SaaS, etc., is really the CAC problem. So essentially acquiring net new dollars, it becomes more and more expensive every single year. Due to rising labor costs, more competition, you essentially also are unable to raise prices because it's so much easier to build software. You have so many competitors around you, etc. And consumers, also, businesses also expect, getting better rates. So a lot of companies are feeling the squeeze. So essentially, then also acquiring net new dollars is just becoming more and more difficult. So the only way, really, if you look at, where the cost base lies in your company, typically that's in the people section. So you unfortunately need to figure out ways of how to become essentially significantly leaner and meaner as we progress into the future. Because if you want, your competitors definitely will, and that is very, very possible today, unlike maybe sort of 3, 4, 5 years ago, right? So, and many companies in the Bay Area, so in San Francisco, essentially are able to do that already today. So we just, want to make sure we are unlocking those efficiencies around the world for customers in the US and Europe, etc. And just to do that in the sales space.
You work a lot in this sales space. Didn't you see a solution kind of fitting your need back then, or kind of why did you decide to actually go build what you need?
Good question. So I was using one of those legacy providers out in the space. So the legacy providers, they're very big companies with hundreds of millions of dollars. And essentially they build their software around bigger teams, because essentially bigger sales team means more revenue, and they charge per seat, and that's how they make their money. I always thought that was wrong. Why would you want to have more headcount? So yes, there are softwares out there in the market, but they're not pushing the needle and are essentially on the bleeding edge when it comes to efficiency levels. And that's what we're looking to change. There's a lot of different sort of little things that need to happen in order to see efficiency. So you kind of have to have this, let's call it, unique insight as a former VP sales or as a frontline rep sending emails and understanding the world of ML and AI, etc. That essentially the fact that most companies don't use any form of machine learning and Gen AI crunching their CRM data or any other data sets that they have in sales. And so we're putting, an end to that and really unlocking efficiencies from customers' data. So there's a lot of things that can be done. And I think the best, closest sort of, benchmark to how things can be done is if you look at the marketing landscape. So if you look at, that world of advertising, that everything's run on machine learning and so on and so forth, and big data. For example, Google does that and Facebook does that, etc. A lot of these things can be brought over to the world of sales technology. And transitioning essentially decisions that are happening in sales from humans over more to big data, essentially. And that's what we're looking to unlock for the company. So we're doing a lot on that front behind the scenes. Our customers going to be seeing more of that later this year.
Perfect. Just kind of going back a bit on the founding team, because I know all of you guys, the co-founders, and it's actually a very kind of one of the best teams that I know. Your co-founders are super fast and in building and you're super fast in selling. So what was the one or two things that click in the beginning between you guys and like you decided to work, or maybe in the other words is that how did you convince them that your idea is worth building?
Good question. So first, if you're on Y Combinator, and if you have a profile there, you're definitely serious about starting a company typically. So on my hand, I exited my job as a VP sales, and I had two choices in my life. Either I start again, and I already had another job offer for being head of sales for another company, which is very successful right now as well. They're just also raised Series A, and so that was my option one: go into a job as another head of sales and sell a really cool software for another CEO, or start my own company. And I'm the guy that typically, like, if I'm too comfortable, meaning selling stuff I'm already very comfortable, then you really need a new challenge. And so that new challenge was actually to start a company as the next, let's call it, phase of my life. And that's why I had that, inner desire to start a company and solve essentially one of the key problems that I had. So I'm actually building this company for my former self and to replace also, some of the things that I do, which means, on a daily basis, when I do pipeline generation. Now, when it comes to the co-founders, so those guys, they know each other for over 2 decades, literally since the first grade going to school. So they're literally inseparable. Like, I call them a married couple because, if you've been together for like 20 years, you're definitely a married couple. So when we met, I met one of them first. His name's Daniel, over a coffee here in Vilnius. Like, he literally pinged me, sent me this horrible template on YC saying, "Hey, look like you have a cool profile. Would love to connect." Blah blah blah. I said, "Okay, let's grab a coffee tomorrow." And so we grabbed a coffee. And essentially, their story is the fact that they really hate being in a job. That's how it is. They rather tinker and build their own company, but they are both. So Daniel is an engineer. He's a backend engineer. And then his mate is David, and he's a front-end engineer. So they've been both building stuff together and trying to make things, but nothing really, really took off. So they're forced to be in jobs because, they had to survive essentially. They're forced to be in jobs, but they really, really hated it. They were good at it, but really, really hated it. But they were essentially compounding skills. But their real desire was to start a company ASAP. The problem was that they started to build things together, and everything failed because they were missing the commercial piece essentially to the puzzle. So this is why they were looking for the third co-founder, and this is why they were on the YC. But anyway, I explained my idea to Daniel over coffee. It took probably like an hour or so. Daniel got so pumped that he said he wants to code that same night. And I said, wait a minute, we haven't scoped this out. We haven't done our validation. Even though I'm the domain expert in the topic, you still want to talk to customers, etc. And I said, hold your horses, go play some video games, whatever else that you do in your life. And so then he introduced me to his mate, Dovydas, and spoke to him next day. Dovydas was not, I think, too impressed about me initially. He was like, "This is too good to be true. This must be something off about this guy." So he was trying to dig some dirt about me, but he found nothing. So then, kind of was okay. Then I think they still had to marinate the thoughts around, actually working with me back in the days. So what I was doing meanwhile, because I don't sit idle, I went on to this what's called Antler Accelerator. It's a startup accelerator. It's what I call Tier 2 accelerator to Y Combinator. You can go to Berlin, Stockholm, a few other places, Amsterdam, etc. And essentially, there's like 50 co-founders or sort of startup wannabes, what I call them, that get together. You have to kind of form a team, etc. So that was my also kind of another plan or another stream of getting a co-founder. So I was also trying to hunt for my top CTO there. And so that's what I was doing like for 2-3 months back then. And meanwhile, I was while I was still trying to confirm, who should be really on the team, I was doing my validation work. So I did like 40 user interviews. I managed to sell the product to four people without having a single line of code. And I think what was happening during this sort of phase, as I was selling and I was sharing with the guys, "Hey guys, just got my first order." And then, "Hey guys, a second one already." And then, "Hey guys, there's a third customer already paying for this." And so they've never seen in their ever lifetime that there was essentially, let's call it, an opportunity where there's no code that has been shipped and there's already customers flocking to this thing. For them, that was something unreal. And I think that's the motivation and the conviction that came to them. And also, I would say for me, right? So because if I'm able to get the orders for the thing that doesn't exist, it gets you pumped. So So yeah, I mean, this is how you sort of build a conviction and kind of self-validate in your head. You're onto something, right? If people are willing to pull out the credit card and pay for a thing, essentially a landing page that I bought for $10 on car.co, and with just an idea and a cool guy on the camera or whatever like me, then there's something here, right? And we could probably scale this up. So yeah, this is what got them pumped. And then, you know, we then started to, then I had to make my decision, essentially, who's the really the team on this. And so I did go with Daniel and over this. And so reason one, I mean, there's two of them, and this is like a mammoth of a thing that we need to build. So having two co-founders, technical ones, on this is much better than having one CTO guy, right? So that's first, right? That's two of them, just literally, right? So plus both of them have been together for 20 plus years. So, you know, if I put my sort of, let's call it investor hat on, you can't separate them, you know? So pretty much impossible, right? So that's great, right? So that means they're going to work with each other for the next 20 years. Great stuff. And then the other reason was they were on the ground in Vilnius, which is where I'm based, due to my wife and the two kids that we have. And so that was, you know, it's good to be in person. Very important, I think, when you're building a tier one company. Like being remote, I don't personally believe in that. I believe that the team has to be together, preferably in the Bay Area. Unfortunately, we're not, but that's for another story. And yeah, and then from then on, you know, it took us probably about less than a month to build an MVP, then 2 months to build a proper thing. And then off we went. We launched in June 2023. We incorporated in June 2023 out of Estonia as one of the top places in the world to incorporate. It's like a no-brainer, really. And then, yeah, so it kind of took off from there.
So before going to the like SalesForge topic, because I see that all the talks, you know, lead to SalesForge. So just kind of, I mean, I know you for 2 years, and like one of the things that I can say about you is that you're crazy good in convincing, and you have a magic of connecting with people. And I remember, you know, like you sending us updates about the sales and other things. So I think like there is this great skill that we should talk about it in a bit later. But now, so I would love to hear more like a short pitch of SalesForge or SalesForge ecosystem, like what it is and kind of what's the goal of this product and who it is for.
Sure. So again, just to recap while I'm preparing everything here on my screen. So SalesForge is a product that's designed for B2B companies. So you have to be in B2B, and typically any B2B company, you're really, I mean, any company is about two things. One is you need to build some stuff, and you need to sell some stuff. We just help you to sell that stuff better from a standpoint. We generate the demand for that product, right? Help you generate demand. It assumes that you have product market fit, first of all, and it assumes you also have channel fit. Because think of essentially us, or I guess, as an acquisition channel, right? So we can help you acquire customers right now through cold email, whether you're using AI agents or otherwise. Soon we're going to add LinkedIn actually next month. But it's like Google Ads, right? So you're looking to acquire customers. If you had prior experience in the past that you were successful, then you should be successful, because we're essentially unlocking the efficiencies for you. A lot of customers come to us also without product market fit, without channel fit, and this becomes essentially as a test ground for them to see if they can actually make it work. So what I want to go first, though, through is explain our logic, because I think we're very unique as a company in the sense that we exist for now 20 months something, and we as a company have 6 products already, which is unreal, unheard of, essentially, for most of the people out there. So I'm going to, first of all, go through the page, which is what we call the ecosystem page. So if you just go to salesforge.ai/ecosystem page, you can see gazillions of products just here, Forge ecosystem. The reason why we're doing what we're doing, and a lot of VCs will think we're crazy and they won't give us any money, which is fine. I don't say you'll have to always listen to VCs and everything. Build what makes sense for your customers. And so with the way that we're seeing the space, and then I'm gonna go into this in a bit, is that the space is very fragmented. That means there's a lot of what's called point solutions in the market. And essentially, these point solutions solve different pain points of you helping to build your pipeline. So, for example, you need one software to get the leads. You need another software to set up what's called email infrastructure, another software to send some emails, and so on and so forth, right? So essentially, you can need a lot of different pieces of software to really drive what we call maximum possible efficiencies. And you're typically buying that from different vendors. That means multiple invoices, multiple support teams. It's also more expensive overall if you're buying from different vendors, right? Because they have to pay, for marketing, for CAC and all that stuff. And so we call that the Android experience. And we're believing in what we call the Apple experience. One provider, which means SalesForge, what we typically know as the Forge. SalesForge is just the first product that we have shipped. And then essentially what we're doing is we're compounding these softwares on top of each other. If somebody's wondering what are the benefits really of this, is you can first of all Google a software compound model by Rippling, and you can read an article, really cool article by Rippling. But essentially think of this as a sort of HubSpot or Salesforce or some other companies where they essentially have multiple products that they sell to the same user and to the same customer. And it unlocks multiple things for you as a company. You're literally what I call a next level company if you're able to have multiple products that you're selling to the same customer. One of them is you have superior unit economics to point solutions. First of all, that's the first benefit. That is a very important benefit. But you're also being perceived also from a customer more of a strategic vendor as well. Because, if you have multiple solutions, under your belt, they look at you differently than just, one, point solutions. So yeah, I can go on and on. I don't want to spend too much time on this. So I just rather want to show you how it looks like. And I just recommend to read that article by Rippling. So what we're doing is we're going here a bit of the ecosystem. So we have 5 different what we call brands, but we have 6 products altogether. We have 2 products that sit under what we call SalesForge. So SalesForge is the product where we essentially execute the campaigns in sales. So meaning sending out emails or sending LinkedIn messages, etc. So you can do that as what we call as a human. We call that the human path. So you as a human or as a sales team, you're going to go and do your bits. However, we also have what we call a product called Agent Frank. So Agent Frank is an AI SDR product. Essentially, it's a fully autonomous agent that can build pipeline for you. And it also sits in SalesForge. And the reason why it sits in SalesForge rather than a separate brand is because we're big believers that the world that we're moving into is essentially where you're going to have this one software where humans and AI agents will work together to unlock significantly higher output levels, so meaning more pipeline, at significantly lower cost. And we're big believers, if you're only going to use one or the other approach, you're actually worse off as a company. But there are some companies that use only the human path and only the AI agents as well on our hand. But we're definitely sort of plowing ahead towards this, belief that really by you using both, you unlock more and more benefits. It will take some time to build upon that, but I'm definitely clearly seeing that in my head. Now, we have other products we call InfraForge and MailForge. These are what's called email infrastructure products. And I'm going to show you that in a bit as well, as we're going to scroll through. Email infrastructure means that you need to get these what's called secondary domains and email accounts. And the reason why you need to do that is because sending these days any form of sort of what's called unsolicited emails or cold emails from your primary business domain to other businesses with a goal to book a meeting with them is not a really great idea, because every email that you send out, you're at risk of being spam reported, you're at risk of being blacklisted, etc. So if you're doing quite a bit of an activity, you do need these secondary domains. There's no other way around it. So you definitely need to set this up. And you could do that manually yourself, but it's going to take you, hours and days to do that. And it's going to be more expensive than using one of these 2 products. They just operate slightly differently. One is what's called the dedicated IP, and second one is what's called shared IP. Then we have a product called WarmForge. WarmForge essentially boosts your reputation of your infrastructure. It's very important to have, let's call it, boosted reputation at all times. And then the final product, which we're about to launch in about a month's time or so, is called LeadsForge, but I'm still going to showcase that product to you as well. LeadsForge essentially, imagine, solves what we call the data problem. So finding leads. So think of it this way. Imagine if ChatGPT, right? You were like a ChatGPT typing stuff, and if we connected to all the databases in the world, that's exactly what Forge.ai is. You're literally searching for leads, and then we're querying all databases in the world, and we're giving you those leads. Now, so this is how it sort of pans out, So as I said, you have 2 kind of paths, typically with the Forge, with Agent Frank. Agent Frank does everything literally for you. But if you as a human want to set it up everything to yourself, you can. So you're setting up the foundation, meaning the infrastructure bits. You're warming that infrastructure up and boosting it. Meanwhile, you're finding the prospects, and then you're setting up the sequences and really managing all of that within SalesForge. SalesForge is where you really spend majority of your time. So running, the emails, LinkedIn campaigns in the future as well, which is what we're going to be doing quite soon. So yeah, and this is essentially the world essentially that we live in every day. And then when we speak to a customer, they don't have to buy everything. They literally could just buy one product, for example, this one here. So this is also part of our kind of general strategy to do what we call land and expand. We want customer to at least start with one subscription type as they, progress with us sort of, as the time passes, essentially, they would actually buy more products. So this is what we call land and expand strategy. It works fantastically well. I think on our end, just to give an idea, I think only 20%, I think 80% of our revenue is expansion revenue, which is crazy. So we definitely have built this machine that if you go to the website or the pricing page, it is very cheap. But once you start seeing value and getting value from the software, you start buying more and more. So we don't charge, per seat. It's unlimited seats. We charge for the actual consumption of the product. So that's on this. Before I dive into the demo, Jackie, do you have any questions on this? What I covered?
I think all was clear except the warm. So how do you warm domain or just like if you can explain kind of like how?
Sure. So the general problem with when you start sending emails, so even though you have the best targeting, you have the best emails that you're sending, and you're doing everything correctly, right? But the problem is still the prospects don't respond enough meaning from a reply rate standpoint. So typically the communication sort of back and forth between two domains has to be about 15 to 30% roughly reply rate wise. If you want to have this sort of what we call your domain to be perceived as a good domain. Now, when you are sending emails to another party to acquire them, in terms of, kind of getting a meeting with them, you're typically going to see a reply rate of, I don't know, let's say 1 to 5%, somewhere in that range on average. That means it's not high enough as a reply rate. So you need to boost those reply rates somehow. And you do that sort of artificially, essentially. So what WarmForge does is if you connect your email accounts that you're using then to engage with your prospects, it will start, once you click a button, start, warm up. Actually, it does it automatically. You don't even have to click the button. So it just starts. And what will happen is at midnight, you're starting to interact with other businesses in our network back and forth. So this is what's called the warm-up phase. And the reason why so this as a concept exists actually for many years. Back in the days, what humans used to do, I always call it as humans and AI agents. So what humans used to do, what people used to do, is you used to manually warm up. That means you used to write manually emails to each other. That was a thing literally like, about 5 years ago. You used to hire literally teams in some part of the world and say, please just send emails back and forth to boost the domain deliverability. And then automation kicked in. So essentially you're able now to do it programmatically. So programmatically compute a unique email, send it over to another business, and then compute a unique reply and send it back. And you're essentially mimicking this behavior and you're essentially warming up with other cool domains, other cool businesses, and you're building up that reputation. So essentially you are feeding the signals of Google by doing that.
Wow. So I was kind of like, this could be a really like helpful thing for your ecosystem of clients, that because if they can like do this like WarmForge like between each other, so everyone benefits and then kind of it's a win-win for all.
Although also like sometimes like in other platforms, it's called an engagement pod.
Mm-hmm.
You're helping each other by boosting each other's engagement. That's exactly the same thing. It's like sometimes people do that in LinkedIn as well. They have these engagement pods. It's the same thing kind of. It's just that you click a button in our case and it takes care of all your mailboxes.
It's like LinkedIn engagement, lots of comments, likes, share. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Please like on my email. It's the same thing, right? Because if you don't have enough engagement across your email accounts, Google naturally sees that. These are what's called low, accounts with low engagement. It's really bad. So you need to bump it up a bit, So, so that's very, very important. Okay, so let's move on. Then I'm gonna show a couple products only because naturally we have gazillions of products, but I'm gonna show let's call the products that probably make sense to highlight. So one of them will be Agent Frank in particular, and let me just share my tab. So you're you're seeing right now in front of you is SalesForge. SalesForge, and specifically the workspace was called SalesForge 1, the first ever workspace of SalesForge, or the company as well. So you're seeing, I'm just going to walk through a bit the software. So everybody can sign up if they want to. So first of all, we have the mailbox section. This is where you connect your mailboxes. And then we have the contact section. It's a bit like a CRM where you can store all your contacts. Then we've got the Forge section. The Forge section is essentially the knowledge, all the knowledge about your company, essentially. So this is where you, for example, outline what are your value propositions. This is a test account. We're testing essentially gazillions of things. But let's say we have here a value proposition called Agent Frank for SaaS companies. So if we just open that up, so we give it an internal name. We then give it a real product name. We give it the industry that we're in. What is the ideal customer profile? What is the pain that's being solved? What's the solution that's an offer? And what's the cost of inaction? So this is essentially where you're building a value prop. And you can have multiple, as you can see, because sometimes companies have multiple products that they sell. And then when you set up the agent, you select the value prop that you want to push. So you only want to push one particular value prop.
So here for each campaign, you're kind of like trying to give the prompt to your agent about that exact campaign, or are you giving a kind of overall prompt to the agent and then subsection of prompts for each campaign?
Well, I'm going to explain that. Every time when we are reaching out to a person out of the blue, so we take the context here from the product. Then we call this what we call the seller data. Plus we also have what we call the knowledge base. Going to explain in a bit. And then we combine the seller data with what we call the buy data. What do we know about that particular individual when you reach out to them? Let's say we have you, Jahid, right? So we're gonna go on and check out, let's say, what we can see on your website. And we're gonna go on to check out what we see on LinkedIn, on your profile exactly. And we're gonna go on and also crawl the web. We're also gonna go on, if you have connected the CRM, we're gonna check whether there were any historical conversations in the past as well. Would you? Right. So there's a record in the CRM. So matching the seller data, matching the buy data, we stitch these two data sets together. So this is why the heck we're reaching out to Jahid, essentially. This is what we know about Jahid. And now we need to compute. So then we compute on top of these sort of two data sets programmatically, essentially. So that allows us to do this thing at scale, and meaning driving relevance in any language at scale. So you can do this in French, you can do this in English, whatever the language you prefer, right? So you can just add another language, etc. So this is super powerful in Europe and so on and so forth. And yeah, so right now, for example, we're aggressively expanding in the Japanese market right now. So we also have the knowledge section. So this is also naturally very powerful, where you can upload your sales playbook, your pricing, your FAQs, all that stuff. And this is naturally what's essentially, this is like this whole section, the Forge, is like a digital section essentially, in the knowledge base of your company essentially. So it can be used either by human when he replies to an email, or either by the agent, essentially autonomously reply. So sequences is where the humans build their campaigns, but I'm going to go over the AI agent section. This is a demo account. You can see here there's some sort of what we call agent setups that we have in here. You can see here some real campaign data of a campaign. Let's try and set up the agent kind of to show you how it works. So you can, as I said, run fully autonomously. So we click on the setting up the agent. So you have really two options in the beginning. One is, if you feel very comfortable with the AI agents, we highly recommend you always go with a fully autonomous mode. That's the mode that I run. I actually never run in this mode. So I always run in the autonomous mode. I'm a big believer in AI agents, and that they can also do a better job than I can as well, because simply, writing, for example, an email will take me, 10, 15 minutes as an example. And it will take Agent Frank to less than sort of about a second to compute an email and send it out, actually. Just, things like that are far, far superior from an agentic standpoint. However, Copilot mode means if Agent Frank will send out that initial email, and if you want to handle the replies, you can handle the replies as well. Otherwise, Agent Frank will handle the replies for you fully autonomously based on what's available in the knowledge base. Then we have to enter the website of our company. So in my case, going to just enter salesforge.ai, and we have seen in real time, we have fetched the data from the site. It kind of gives us an idea that what is this website all about? Then we need, and what is this business all about as well? So we need this sort of little description as well. Then we need to select the product in here. So I'm going to select this product, Agent Frank for SaaS companies. And then we need to select the language. We can only select one language. So we can select American English, or also have translated the exact same thing in Estonian. And then if we didn't have any files added, we can add the files, right? So it's part of our knowledge base, and then just move on to the next step. So in the next step, it's about choosing the scale that you want to operate at. So the minimum scale that we operate at is where the agent has to be able to process up to 1,000 individuals at any given moment. Because the belief is that, and why it has been said at this particular point, is if we're able to always reach out to at least 1,000 individuals for you as a company, then this software should be ROI positive for you. And if somebody says, Frank, I only have customers, 500 customers that I could reach out because I'm really going after Fortune 500 company, then you don't need this thing. You should be doing things manually. But Agent Frank is really designed when you have quite a decent of a TAM, essentially. Decent of a TAM, I would say that typically if you have at least 5 to 6,000 of contacts in total as a TAM to reach out, if you have these are contacts, these are not companies, then 5 to 6,000 contacts, then you should consider Agent Frank as part of your sales efforts. So whatever the volume that you select, but let's say we select only the 1K, then against that, we do need to set up what's called the email infrastructure. So we need these secondary domains. So the way that just Agent Frank works is Agent Frank literally just sits on top of all the forges that I have showed you there. So Agent Frank will use WarmForge. It can use InfraForge to set up the domains. It will use SalesForge to execute, right? It will use LeadsForge to get the data. So every time when we build a new software, we hook it up to Agent Frank. So Agent Frank becomes more and more powerful. It's like Dragon Ball Z, where you just, kind of keep on upgrading it a bit by bit. And so that's how we're looking at upgrading Agent Frank over time. But let's say for 1,000 contacts, we need 10 mailboxes. This is the calculation that we have. So if you're reaching out to 1,000 contacts on any ongoing basis, we need 10 mailboxes, where every email account can only send 30 cold emails per day. This is why you need that many, mailboxes, because you can't send too many. So some customers already have mailboxes, and they can just pick it from here. Or we can just, let the system create it. And we just need a bit of an input here. So what's your company's primary business domain? What are the name types you wanna set? So you wanna have a unique name for each of the mailbox. You wanna have the same name. So I'm just gonna put Jahid and Jahid again. And then here we can have a signature. We can spam check it as well. So it's super important that you have no spam words anywhere, including the signature. And that's it. Confirm. And then we move on to the next step. So this is then where we choose the contacts. Contacts are being currently sourced from LeadsForge. So what we're doing right now is we can either select, a bunch of different filters that are available to us, or sometimes customers like to upload their own data, lead lists from via CSV, from CRM, etc. So I'm going to do that right now and select a random list that I call Agent Frank example leads. They're like really random people, by the way. So that's it. So for example, we selected a mini list with a tag called Agent Frank example leads, and then we're just going to click on go to the next step. So this is where we need to configure the agent on its goals. So think about these goals as Google Analytics goals or conversions essentially that you set. So what do you want it to do? Do you want to drive, for example, traffic to your site where you want Agent Frank just to make sure a click out essentially event happens? So I'll give you an example. Let's say we are a PLG company, right? So product-led growth company where we don't do any demos. We don't do any calls with customers. We don't want to do it maybe as well. It's just not in strategy, but you still would want to drive traffic to your site. So one way you could do that is you could pay for ads, or you can let the agent do it for you, So it's significantly more cost effective, I would say. So let's say I would just sign a page. In my case, it would be like app.salesforge.ai/sign up. And then I'll just give it a go. It's worth to me $200 when this, a thing happens actually. So this is actually rarely used, right? Because most of our customers do want meetings. But that's just, why would you tell the agent to let the prospect sort of, click out? And then the typical setup is here. So where we want to book a meeting, so we can hook up our calendar link, HubSpot link, or just Google Meets, sign and go. And then my favorite is this one here, actually, where we're asking for their meeting booking link. We're seeing typically the highest conversion rate. It kind of has to do with psychology a lot more, because this way the customer is a king. That's how it typically is. So instead of saying, hey, here's my link, no, ask for their link. The conversion rate actually is significantly higher. I tested this, manually at scale, and this is why we're also building that into the agent as well.
Because also kind of this shows that they have a bit of conviction in what you're trying to sell. So they wouldn't give their link for the meeting if they wouldn't, kind of want to be serious on this.
Yeah. So then this, I typically toggle everything on. Essentially, let's use all the, available data sources about the prospect to do our best job, And there'll be a lot more. There'll be gazillions or more. We're building gazillions of other data sources that make an impact actually to the copy. But I just typically toggle everything on, and that's it. Then we select naturally the time zone, very important. The operating hours. Do you want to run on weekends as well? What should be the email length? I typically like to keep it short and snappy. And then there's some cool also features. I mean, I like some features like this one here, where we can tell Agent Frank to talk essentially in the native mother tongue. So you can, he can essentially talk in the language of the prospect. So if the prospect replies in some other language, it can converse in that language as well, right? So suddenly, if the prospect doesn't talk, English, talks French, it'll talk French essentially back at him as well. But these two settings are typically toggle this on. Sub multi-threading and reply means if Agent Frank reaches out to say 2-3 individuals from the company, so that's called multi-threading. And if one of the individual actually replies back from that company, let's say Pepsi.com, then it will stop the sequences, essentially firing to the other individuals at the company once a reply comes back. So it's pretty powerful. Then here we need to set a tone, which is, I think a lot of people are very familiar with sort of using tone, etc.
Mm-hmm.
I like to use the informal tone. However, later this year, we're going to move towards what we call programmatic tones. So we have the ability to, again, based on publicly available data, to understand what is the communication style that Jahid is most susceptible to. And then we'll programmatically set that, let's call it tone. But for now, it's a rules-based, so you set one across every single prospect, and I like the informal one. And then we're going to see a few sort of previews of the emails that will be computed based on all the settings. So this is kind of to give that, let me just zoom out a bit, comfort to the user, how the emails will look like, because everybody's naturally curious, right? So we don't show all the emails because that's not really the point. This is to give comfort of how emails will look on average. The names, of course, will be changed, but this is an example of email that has been computed. You can also check out always the LinkedIn profile of this person. And so Amina works in recruitment, right? It wouldn't be necessarily my ICP, right? This, as I said, these were random leads that I have picked. Then we have some CHRO, Arenas Logistics as well. So you can see that every email is sort of short and snappy to the point where we're looking at, some of the information from their profile. Then we're pitching our agent. And we always have an open-ended question at the end. What do you think? Is this a priority, etc., to spark a conversation? So we don't just send one email. We send 3 emails in total. So there's 2 follow-up emails that will be computed essentially after this.
Okay.
And yeah. So also subject lines are actually lowercase. So a lot of people are like, why are they lowercase? And that's exactly why we're doing it, because it's a pattern interrupt. And we compute actually subject lines against customers, data on LinkedIn, for example. For example, lowercase specifically because it drives significantly better performance than not, essentially. So we're doing things like these to maximize essentially performance from customers' campaigns.
Agent Frank, the work is done once I hop on a call with a client, or is it going to kind of do after the call follow up and then take the last step?
Yes. So imagine the prospect replies back to you. Agent Frank will fully autonomously engage within a minute back to the prospect. And that's the speed. So while you sleep, the Agent Frank works for you in any time zone, right? So especially, if somebody in this part of the world, targets the US, and you just want to go enjoy your time with the family and go to bed, you can do that while Agent Frank, keeps building pipeline for you autonomously. And yes, his job is to book. It's an end-to-end solution, right? That's how we're designing this. So we want to get to a stage where you set it up once and it works for you really well, and that's it. I set it, forget it. And then all you're doing is you're tracking the replies in what we call the prime box section. This is where we aggregate all the replies. I have a lot of emails here coming here. So some positive, etc. We have for the AI agent section, we have a section called action required. So this is also where if the agent does not know what to respond back, then it will stop essentially, right? It's to protect essentially the brand of the business. So we're running what we call evals. So we're evaluating essentially the replies before they would go back to the prospect. And then if the confidence interval that this is a quality reply drops below X, then the agent stops and then it goes in here.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's for me to sort of, respond essentially and so on and so forth. So I guess there was here something that the agent didn't know what to respond, and then I intervened. Essentially, the human intervenes only if the agent doesn't know what to do. And then to make sure that the agent always runs without interruptions, then you would typically upload more, for example, stuff into the knowledge base.
Okay.
It actually knows more and more.
Okay. I think kind of like after the call, Agent Frank is done, so it's only for the outreach now. Like there's no action taking like after the call. If I hope.
No, that's what the human takes over. Yes. So we as a business stop at the point where you book in a meeting essentially. Right?
Yeah.
We've done that. That's where we say we've done our job essentially. That particular point. So there's a lot of different conversations here. These are all real conversations that actually got computed by the agent, whether they're positive or negative. So of course you set up your own name that you want to set up, right? So Silas Scott is a made up name essentially. And again, this was a unique email that was computed to Parf. It was sent to Parf. Then a follow-up email was sent, second one, a third email was sent. And then Parf said, "Hi, Silas, I appreciate the info, but it's not quite what I'm looking for," right? And then it stops, right? So it always stops or, responds back, if it is relevant, if there's something to be engaging with. Or for example, right now it says here, "Please don't contact me again." It will also not contact again, actually. So it definitely, listens to the commands, etc., quite well. And that's exactly what an AI agent is meant to do, right? And once naturally there are neutral responses or, somebody says, "Can you explain me this? How are you different to this? How are you different to this competitor?" It then actually processes these,
Perfect.
So that was on Agent Frank. So this is one of our products that's what we call one of the best sellers. And let's call it that way. Sells pretty well. And because a lot of people look at this product from a standpoint of them not necessarily maybe needing to hire that many SDRs or they're looking to significantly improve their CAC, so cost of customer acquisition, essentially, how they're acquiring these customers. In some businesses, especially the larger ones where we work, they put reps, for example, on key accounts, and so the reps only focus on the bigger fish and the big opportunities. But then they have this sort of the long tail, thousands of accounts that just tiny fish essentially that nobody really wants to go after. And this is a fantastic example where you can apply Agent Frank in tandem, working alongside the team. We personally, you do both. So we have a sales team. They use naturally SalesForge to execute emails. Naturally, they do ping people on LinkedIn, and they do cold calling. They do the typical stuff that you do in SaaS. And then Agent Frank runs in tandem. And for me, Agent Frank right now books, while I'm talking to you, Jackie, it books, about 1 or 2 demos a day on low volume. So that, still as a CEO, I have enough kind of, conversations going with our customers as well.
How do you see the future? Kind of a year ago or 2 years ago, there was a saying that, there will be no need for like human SDRs, like it will all be agent. But now I see that there's a bit shift of, that, okay, it's better to have the human and the AI together because, they can work better together. So how do you see this, evolve in the next coming years? Like, are we going to stick with the human and the agent, or are we going to kind of go with agent because the agent will learn a lot from human by then?
So there's essentially multiple problems with humans and there's multiple problems with agents. Now on the agent part, the biggest problems would be the regulatory front. So I think we still haven't catched up to regulations on the agentic front. So I would expect regulations to come into place in the coming years. I'm not sure what regulations, but I would expect some regulations to be in place. So for example, there's one regulation which is in place, which makes people believe that you can't fully replace humans. And that's the fact that, for example, in the US, you can't use agents to do cold calling. That's illegal. So if it's illegal to do cold calling with AI agents, even though AI agents are fantastic for cold calling, much better than humans, most humans, I'm talking about here, then if it's illegal, then you're still forced to use humans, essentially. So this is an example of where you'll be plowing reps into do cold calling, but the other two channels, like to look after, for example, email, LinkedIn, you're better off let the agent do the legwork for you. So this is an example of, from a kind of channel standpoint, how I see this evolve. And this is, so, also the former, CTO of OpenAI is also a big believer right now in the fact that we're not going to move into full agentic, world economy. We're going to be blending. So we're big believers in the blend. We're always were from the get-go. But yeah, right now the market is heavy. There's a lot of software just for humans. These are legacy providers that are being killed. They're like Excel. You're eating them sort of for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day, and they're getting smaller and smaller, sort of. We're getting bigger and bigger. And then there's these cool new companies, which are AI agent only companies. But I think a lot of investors and sales leaders in the community do not believe in a full-on agentic world, and that means that these companies are highly unlikely to become what I call really big. Because if you're making what I call a grave mistake by discounting humans. So we definitely need what we call a new breed of software, but we need a software where essentially humans and AI agents can coexist, interact, and play nicely with each other when it comes to sales. And that's what we're building. We are the number one company in the space for this, in particular, in sales. So, and yeah, we're looking to do the best job in the market on this. And this is how we're looking to crush the market and give really hard time, both for the legacy companies that only service humans and both the sexy new companies that just do AI agents. So because companies will wake up definitely one day and be like, no, I can't be just, running, essentially my sales team out of two softwares, one software for humans and another one for AI agents. That it just doesn't make sense. It leads to more fragmentations.
Yeah. Are we going to have a quick overview of Forge?
Yes, exactly. Let me probably use it. So LeadsForge is a product that's not launched yet to the public, but this product is what I call the ChatGPT moment of the data world. But the data world specifically meaning leads. So, every startup founder, even when I was in my early days, I was looking for leads, right? And then typically it becomes, which database should I use? Should I use Apollo or should I use some other database? There's so many databases out there to use. You're not really sure. I just need some leads. That's all I need, right? And then a lot of people started sort of search leads on ChatGPT, Perplexity, etc. And I was like, damn, there's all these crazy tools, but why can we just not make it simple where you can just search for leads? An interface, like a ChatGPT interface. And that's exactly what LeadsForge.ai is. LeadsForge.ai is a ChatGPT-like interface, which allows you to search for leads across multiple databases in the world, specifically against your search parameters. So think of it as Google, think of it as ChatGPT. It's exactly that. So let me show you a bit of it and how it works.
Yeah, because I was doing that actually. I was using ChatGPT and Perplexity, finding some leads. And the problem that I faced was that in Latin America, the project that I was working for, is that there were no information on those individuals, and also they had this long name, 5 names altogether. ChatGPT couldn't know what's the actual name. Is it 5 name, or because here in Europe we either have 2 or 3 names, but there's one sentence long. And
yes,
it was a bit
I
hard.
know what you mean. My co-founder is exactly that.
Okay, let's go.
So yeah. So so we are right now in LeadsForge. So it's literally has to work, and it does work as ChatGPT essentially, in a sense where you just start typing in something and you're searching for leads, and then you'll get leads, and then you take those leads wherever you want to take them. Right? It doesn't have to be SalesForge. It can be anywhere, HubSpot, and so on and so forth. So this is still what we call in alpha stage. We still didn't get to beta, but we'll get to beta and launch in literally 4 weeks. That's how fast we ship. So all you do is is you type in for some leads. Let's just type in some random, I don't know, I'm looking for a VP sales. So looking for VP sales in the US to 200 employees in the software space. And that's it, but you could literally type in anything, right? So, and then boom, ta-da, we've got 1,000 VP sales up to 200 employees picked for us in a second. See, that's how fast it works. I don't have a bigger screen, but essentially there's a few UI things that we're looking to implement. So, for example, move this to the left, for example, and just look at the table view here a bit more. But you can still look at the table view like this. Then you can see sort of what sort of individuals we have, from which companies we have them, what are the locations, and so on and so forth. What are the industries? What are the company keywords, company size, company revenue, how many years in business, and so on and so forth. And then you can kind of keep on typing stuff, or you can just keep playing with the filters. And you can just say, can I also add Singapore? I don't know, whatever, right? So
can we ask for the emails? Or
yes.
That's the wall. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not sure why it doesn't search for Singapore. Maybe we don't have the coverage there, but I need to have a look. But yes, so let's say you want to get the emails out, right? So yes, you definitely can get the emails out. Can I get the emails? Boom. Yeah, it's going to cost you 1,000 credits, start export, and you're done.
Wow. Okay. This is actually so useful for so many other companies, even out of your kind of focus zone now. Because everyone needs a lead. So
you can take those leads wherever you want to, right? So it's just that we're like Google in a way that we will have what we call search queries happening in our system, and then we'll be running what we call data auctions. Any data vendor will be able to bid for that search term if they want to sell their piece of data to us. So because otherwise, what we're trying to do is we want a democratize access to leads data, right? Because you as a user, you don't know and you don't care which database to use, right? You just need leads, and you want to have high quality leads at the lowest possible price. So to drive that into the prices, that's why the auctions will exist, right? So whoever will give us the cheapest price for that data point wins the auction, and you as a user will benefit from that. So yes, and so we're believing this is really what are essentially hundreds of thousands of people in B2B are looking for, actually, rather than going to this database and that database and then whatever, So yeah.
Thank you so much, Frank, for showing us the LeadsForge before even going public. I have a section for this episode which I was talking about. I want to talk about product building philosophy, because you guys are shipping new products every 3 months or even way more often. So kind of my question is that how is that possible? And what's the logic of shipping every quarter or so often more than that?
So yeah, so we call this parallel building. So you can either build sequentially or you can build in parallel. In parallel, it requires more engineering input, and more engineers essentially working on stuff. So the way that we sort of decide on the products is really based on customer requests. By the way, we have a new Forge coming up also next month or the month after. Another one, we haven't announced it yet, but another one coming up. Very, very cool name, by the way. But again, for example, with this Forge, even the one that we didn't announce, how do we come up? So we had a lot of feedback from the customers. It was sitting around. And either we do something about it or not, is the question. Essentially, if we don't do something about it, we're not monetizing that demand that we have from the customers right now. And if it just becomes a question of who is doing this, well, we just find an engineer too. Really, we have typically 2-3 engineers only assigned per product. There's actually not that many engineers, because today you can build much faster with cursor and everything than you could, like a year or two ago. So you don't need as many engineers to have superior a sort of, a shipping velocity. We're big believers that the only way to become really big meaning $100 million+ company, is you aggressively plow across multiple products that are that have a high overlap with each other, right? It's super complementary, meaning the same user will buy 1, 2, 3, 4 subscriptions. That's how we're optimizing, right? We're optimizing for this. How many subscriptions actually per customer do we have on average? And we want to get this number up as much as we can. That means all products have to improve, etc. You could say that by having such a strategy, you are maybe shipping slower. Highly, I don't think there's a right and wrong with this. It's just that we also, when we look at the market, when everybody has a point solution, they're just building one point solution. We also want to build differently. We want to be known as a different company. The company, we are a product engineering led company. Out of 40 employees in the company, 30 are in product engineering. We ship like salespeople. We have monthly targets. They have to ship, or else. So we ship hard, we ship fast, we're very aggressive. And these forges is essentially, it's like a startup within a startup. And so you essentially have squads, think of it this way, for this product, and then squad for this product, and then squad for this product. And so it's definitely doable. It just requires a lot of good engineers, and that's it. But from a kind of business standpoint, it also allows us to de-risk, because think of it this way, that one product may be a flop, will die. But it won't die, it will not grow as you expect, right? So you're de-risking of becoming big by making bets on these different, that's called mini startups. And as long as, say, 2 out of 6 become a bestseller, you're fine, So that's how I think about it, So, because you don't know which of them will become the big thing. But so, for example, my bet right now is that the SalesForge with Agent Frank is the big bet. And then same with LeadsForge hasn't launched yet, so you're making these big bets to the, 10 million milestone, right? That we're up against right now, because we know that these other products are super important, but is it $100 million business? It's not on its own, right? So, but SalesForge cannot become $100 million business unless I ring fence it with other products. So the other products will make SalesForge as a core mothership product will become, essentially, that's the only way how to get to $100 million. If all these products essentially make several $1 million in their own sort of rights. But the other advantage essentially of these products is that for each of those brands, you can have its own go-to-market strategy. So the sales team and the marketing team can do whatever with this Forge in this particular way, on this Forge in that particular way, and so on and so forth, right? So it gives you also that flexibility.
And kind of like, is it you on the founding team, like your co-founders coming up with new Forge ideas, or now do you have product managers that they're also on the scout of, what could be a mini product for the whole ecosystem of Forges?
So the short answer is that's still me, for better or worse, right? So you don't want the CEO, dictating product, but it looks like I am still for a while. Now the dilemma is I am the only proper domain expert in the field in the whole business, even though we have 30 people in product engineering, and that is a dilemma in itself. That I'm the best suited to decide which product is next and how we do it.
And you're also competing slowly or already with your existing partners, because you could use other kind of providers for, let's say, WarmForge, InfraForge. So how do you kind of communicate what you're releasing with your existing partners, and what does it mean also for your small competitors that kind of, are you going to take over them with a new Forge? Or
well, so yeah, maybe a backstory, because maybe some people don't know. So we power right now over 20 competitors as well with our tech stack. This is also part of the reasons if you decouple some capabilities and competitors don't want to do that particular capability. So for example, running infrastructure, then we can power them, and we are like what we call a friendly competitor. We're like Switzerland in the game. We believe that the market is big enough for everybody. We don't have to be going at each other's throat, right? So as long as everybody has their sort of what I call unique positioning in the market, that's the most important. We want to be known as the Apple of the ecosystem, with where you come to us, we have these multiple products that work with us, that works, and you will feel that Apple, sort of experience. We have the Forge ID, etc. And yes, we build more and more products. So right now we have LeadsForge.ai launching, soon, and we have what we call some data partners, right? And we're going to be competing against them suddenly, with this new product. By the way, whoever's listening, and if you're a partner of ours, I'm most likely going to be competing with you. So we're not done with product building. So, but the market is big enough because there will be some advantages to point solutions, is my take, why some customers will go with a point solution in some cases versus the Apple ecosystem kind of feel. So I think we have rather smart, relatively smart people in the whole the ecosystem of competitors, etc. They're smart people. It's not like somebody's I don't know, crazy, batshit crazy, or doesn't want to talk. Competitors do talk with each other in this space, because I think a lot of people, are, former consultants, former salespeople like myself, etc. We don't mind talking to each other. I mean, I even have webinars with my competitors. I did one yesterday and one 2 weeks ago with another competitor. So we don't like, just something I think that's evolving. And I think the smartest companies just generally in the world, and the smartest founders in the world are the ones that also figure out ways of how do they work with their competitors, direct competitors. And I'll give you an example of essentially Google and Apple. So Google pays Apple how much, $1 billion or something, or $1 trillion? I can't remember. A lot of money. So that Google search is on Apple. They pay a lot of money and they compete, but they still work with each other, right? That's how I also look at these sort of things. As long as the market is big enough, you should be fine.
Great. I mean, kind of like moving on the sales and marketing aspect of this is that I'm sure like so many of and also you mentioned that how you got from 0 to 3 million ARR within 12 months. But I want just like a short overview of how that happened and kind of what will be the next milestone in terms of number for you within what year or like how many months?
Sure. So we scaled to about $1 million without any employees. So just to give you an idea. So I'm a big believer as well that you can scale to about $1 million in ARR by not hiring anybody. Try and do that, please. Don't go and hire gazillions of people to get to $1 million. So there's definitely ways to do that. So that's one. Then we scaled to about $2 million in ARR with no people in sales, marketing, and customer success. So nobody in sales, nobody in marketing, nobody in customer success. Imagine scaling that to $2 million. And then we started to hire people in go-to-market. And then we got to $3 million and that's it. So that's the 12-month story. So now, again, every story, every company is different, right? So, but in our case, we did a lot of what's called founder-led sales, meaning we're always talking to customers. Always. But founder-led sales typically means you are visible, people follow you, etc. You can see me, Jahid, probably every day on LinkedIn. Every day I post something on LinkedIn and I'm trying to bring value. Whether people like it or not, they're watching the content and they get entertained. I'm telling everything that happens here at SalesForge. I'm sharing customer stories, sharing problems that we solve, what are the product announcements, whatever, all the various different bits. But I make sure that there's no way that you're going to miss me ever. You're definitely gonna see my face on LinkedIn. I call that LinkedIn feed domination strategy. As in, you connect to a lot of your ICPs consistently. You can reach out, you can connect to 100 people. So connect to 100 ICPs on a weekly basis and just keep on producing valuable content for your ICP, feed them. And they don't have to like it, they don't have to comment on it, they just have to see it. It's about reach. It's all about reach on LinkedIn. And do that at least Monday to Friday, once a day, if your ICP is on LinkedIn. So that's kind of thing one. Can you do that literally from day zero, before even starting SalesForge, to talk about what you're doing and how you're doing it, etc.? Guess what? That has helped massively, right? To get us where we are. Now, massively, I mean, I would say maybe up to 10%, but of the impact, but that's a huge impact, 10%, 10% founder-led sales. And then, we do a lot of kind of, thing, like, I think it's very hard to say what we don't do, right? So if somebody says, Frank, are you on Reddit? Yes, we're on Reddit. Frank, do you do YouTube? Yes, we do YouTube. Frank, do you do SEO? Yes, we do SEO. We do a lot of different things. And the reason why we were always so aggressive and doing bit here, bit there, is because we're big believers in what's called the integrated marketing approach. That means if you have customers spending a bit of time on LinkedIn, a bit of time on Facebook, a bit of time on X and Reddit, wherever the place, YouTube, you need to be in these places, because if you see my face or my brand across these different platforms, the probability that you're gonna go on salesforge.ai and convert or give us a call or check out the product, etc., is significantly higher than you just having one channel approach, right? Plus,
then kind of like Frank, what's your advice on entrepreneurs, what to focus most, several of them, or kind of just to scale in one, or kind of like for the ones that they are in, let's say, pre-seed or seed level as you?
So pre-seed level would be, still in the early days, you always build what's called personal brand, because people buy from people at the end of the day. And at pre-seed, typically you're nobody, and there are gazillions of startup founders that are what's called nobodies. There's a lot of nobodies. Less than 5% there are somebodies. That's how it is. guess what? To become generally successful, you have to be a somebody. Whether you like it to be on LinkedIn or not, sorry, but you have to have a personal brand. That's the reason why everybody's following Elon Musk and so on and so forth. It's the brand power of the individual. Whoever is at the helm, you have to build a brand. If you have the brand, it's much easier for you to be so much more successful, accelerate faster, etc. Because guess what? When people make a buying decision, even in the early days, they're trying to figure out, should I buy Frank's software or should I buy the software that exists for like 8 years and there's a lot of, that software is mature, right? So let's say you're competing. Buyers are not stupid. They're going to go and do their due diligence. And then they're going to ask themselves a question. Do they buy from this guy, Frank, or did they buy from that guy? And even though Frank's software just was released back then, a few months in, they'll buy my software.
Yeah, they know you and they kind of also like resonate with you more.
Yes, not because my software is maybe better. You're not just renting the software. You're renting the team behind the software. You're renting Frank.
Yeah. But like, what was the logic of you associating yourself with bacon? And now kind of like, like BaconForge, all these things. So what was the logic behind that?
First of all, I think, it needs to be explained to the audience what bacon even stands for. So bacon is very well known as a thing in the US and across the sales community. It stems from, there's a saying, bringing home the bacon. Or in Europe, it's typically bringing home the bread. It means you're bringing home the commission, the money. And essentially it means success, sales, commission, money is what you are actually, is the reason why you're actually in the startup world. You're there for bacon. People just don't call it that way. Now, I know what bacon stands for, and I was always, to me, it was very interesting as a concept. From the first time when I heard about it many years ago, I was like, damn, I'm all about fucking bacon. In my head, I'm gonna be the Mr. Bacon. And the way that this very simply starts is you put a bacon emoji on your LinkedIn profile.
And you are now like
Yes, and then it just trickled down from there on. You're sitting in my BaconForge, podcast room. Our office is called BaconForge. You can just Google it, BaconForge. It's our Slack channel, general Slack channel is called BaconForge. Our payments channel is called Bacon. Because bacon is bacon. So and the reason. So think of it this way: you have to build your personal brand, but as part of the brand, sometimes what happens is when users do what's called brand recall, they're trying to recall you as an individual. Sometimes they forget your name, but they will have a very hard time to forget the emoji. You may forget my name, but you'll remember the bacon guy. It's a much better recall. It actually helps you to have some sort of image as an association with your face or with your brand, etc. Super powerful. So I typically, tell that to folks. If you want to kind of spice up your personal brand, try and figure out this little emoji that you always kind of, it's always around your name. It's always around this Frank Sondors, as a brand, because people will recall the emoji or that image much, much better. There's a much, much better recall on that than you actually first name, last name.
You're just like motivating me to go and choose my own kind of, this sticker emoji. So kind of like the question is, what's the next revenue milestone and when do you kind of like want to get that?
Revenue milestone, 10 million ARR by the end of the year. That's very aggressive. What's that?
By like 2025.
Yeah, that's what we were aiming for. Yes, it was a slower Q1 than expected. Essentially, some startups, go like this, which is very rare, by the way. Everybody talks about, all startups go like this. There's a lot of startups that go like this. It's a bit like an S curve, essentially. We're like an S curve growth. So first quarter was quite slow, but essentially the rest of the year, we are definitely very aggressive in terms of what we have expectations. Plus, our big revenue bets haven't kicked in yet. So we have every year you should have what they call big revenue bets as a company, because otherwise, how are you going to make it? Sure, you can say that this product I'm selling is going to sell better, but we are in the space what's called the red ocean space. You have competitors that competing against you for the same user base, etc. So you need to play smart. What's your next move? What's the next increment? How are you getting to 10? And then the strategy from 10 to 20 is a different strategy, et cetera, et cetera. So right now, our always strategy was what's called phase one. Phase one is to complete ecosystem V1. And the V1 of the ecosystem completion will finish with LeadsForge launch. LeadsForge is the final piece of the puzzle of the ecosystem before we can call it properly an ecosystem and we go to market and preach hardcore the ecosystem approach and for folks to deprecate their point solutions. So that there'll be sort of positioning change in kind of the brand and everything. And then naturally, LeadsForge is a big business for us. It can easily become, $10 million product in its own, right within a year. So, there's a, expectation on that product. There's expectation once we launch LinkedIn is another multi-million-dollar revenue stream. Also, we are expanding quite aggressively on what we call on the reseller front. So giving the ability to white label our product. It's a very big business just in itself. If somebody needs a reference point on that, you can look at a company called High Level in the US. It's $100+ million company, and about 60 million of that is white label revenue. So, so there's all these bets that we have in our heads that's called cooking. And again, it's part of kind of strategy to de-risk. Plus we have what do we call it? 2 or 3 sub bets, let's say it that way. So imagine if you have essentially 5 bets in total, and essentially whatever happens, we'll make it to 10. Like we're doing so much, we're doing enough to feel comfortable that we'll get to 10. Like, that's probably the best way to look at it.
Yeah. But so you guys are doing all these things, from Europe, from Vilnius, Lithuania, Eastern Europe, Baltic. Most of your competitors moved to the US, even the ones, which were from Europe. Why did you decide to stay in Europe? And because I know there was a debate at some moment, that like some of you moved to the US. When will you see yourself in the US market just being there full time?
So, I mean, I'm not opposed to moving to the Bay Area. My wife is. So I think that's where the maybe disconnect lies.
Hopefully she'll listen to this.
Totally categorically against moving anywhere else. That's why I'm actually in this part of the world.
Okay.
And so it would be my choice. I would be in Singapore right now, but I'm actually flying to Singapore today, actually. So funny enough, just for a conference. But yeah, definitely, the probability, the chances of making it big are much higher in the US, predominantly due to talent, I would say. There's a huge concentration of talent in the US, and we don't have access to that talent, essentially, which is a problem. Like we could scale even faster than what we're scaling from where we are right now. So what's hindering us is not being able to access that talent. However, by not accessing that talent, we're profitable, by the way, from day 0. So by not accessing that talent, that also has meant that we're not actually burning cash. We have never yet burned cash, funny enough. So we are totally fine to burn cash, and we will raise the Series A this year and everything. Fingers crossed. But right now, let's think of this this way. So the reason why you're building out of Europe is because Europe is what's called engineering powerhouse. The only thing that Europe is known for is for engineering. Sales, not really great salespeople, unfortunately. But whatever everybody thinks out there that they're great in sales in Europe, trust me. So I know a lot of salespeople all around the world, and most of the cool salespeople sit in the US. So sales is not the firepower. Americans have the sales firepower. And then you need to have the engineering firepower. And there are multiple bases in the world where you can create what we call cost-effectively engineering bases. Europe is one of them. But we have people all around the world, and we will be creating other engineering bases because this is a heavy product engineering company. So there will be a lot more engineers, a lot more product people essentially than salespeople. We don't want to have this huge. Because we're typically like a company that's lean and mean. We're not going to have a lot of salespeople and a lot of customer success people, etc. We're going to use AI agents wherever we can. Our own AI agents. We're going to also implement what we call N8N workflows, to kill repetitive tasks. We have one guy that just builds N8N workflows every week, 10 new workflows, just to make sure that like humans actually don't do this repetitive tasks and selling like invoices and this and that and God knows gazillions of other things. So, but what I want to say is, if I could move to the Bay Area today, I would, yes, 100%. Because even the fact just I would sit there, the fact I would be there, not here, there's a lot more value for this company for me to sit there, not here. A lot more value.
But do you see that happening sometime soon?
So I believe once we'll raise Series A, we'll be sort of forced to do that. So probably the argument is yes, because if we're not going to move, we're not going to make it big. And with this company is we're going big or we're going home.
Yeah. Just a very quick question on the Japan. So why are you expanding there?
Yeah, good question. So while competitors zig, we zag. So everybody's competing in these typical markets, US, UK, Canada, it's the typical stuff. But again, the smartest people, for example, who are the smartest people out there typically? Israelis, as an example. Israelis are very smart people. You know that in the Israeli playbook, when you start a company, like Japan is in that playbook. You go to Japan and you sell your product in Japan. It's just a thing. Nobody knows about it in Europe or US. But it should be part of your playbook. Why is it the playbook to go into Japan or some similar market? Is because it's what I was saying, while everybody zigs, you zag. Essentially, you need to also be in the markets which are not obvious markets, but are very lucrative markets to be in. It could be a different geography, a different segment, whatever. In this case, it's a different geography. Japan. Japan has a lot of similarities to the US in terms of economy, GDP per capita, whatever, all these factors. And Japan is one of the top SaaS markets in the world. They buy a lot of SaaS. They love SaaS. They buy so much SaaS. So the Japanese love to buy a lot of SaaS. They're happy to pay high prices, like the Americans, and low competition, or no competition for us. You just need to make sure you're servicing the market in the local language, in Japanese.
The culture.
From the website to the app, to the making sure Agent Frank works in Japanese, to having a person on the ground. All that is what we're doing. So this is also one of our, bet 5, essentially, the Japanese market. Yes. So you definitely want to, essentially in year 2, year 3, pick a market that's big enough, like Japan, could be South Korea, could be whatever other big market, So as long as, you have done some validation that this is, essentially companies have done that in the past. Essentially Western software has entered the market and has been very successful. And there's a lot of evidence, repeatable evidence that this is a case. And in Japan, it is the case. Then you can be also part of that bandwagon, let's call it, right? So, big believer in Japan, but personally, I've been to Japan myself. Japanese are very smart people. And we'll be doing business in Japan very soon.
That's awesome. So I just mentioned that you have this magic of being very salesy, of course, because of your sales experience, and also very convincing. So what made you a good salesperson?
Good question. What made me a good salesperson? So I typically say, so I hired and fired hundreds of salespeople in my lifetime. Like 1 in 10 is a natural, typically, when you hire them. 2 to 3 people can be trained up to be somewhat good as the person that's natural, and 60% is deadwood. That's as in people who should not be even there in their jobs, and that's actually the segment that we're looking to eliminate, essentially, for the companies, and only increase output levels of the 40%. Now, I always thought to myself, was I a natural or not? I don't know whether I've grown into this or I'm a natural. I think probably people will say I'm a natural, but essentially what happened was I moved to UK when I was from Latvia. I moved to UK when I was 16. Very young age, on my own. So imagine a 16-year-old kid moves this tiny Eastern European country, just entered the EU, and I'm moving to the UK on my own. I got my first job working in Subway as a sandwich artist, and I was in survival mode. I was poor, just to put it bluntly. So I was poor, needed a job. My mom just back then said, "Hey, son, do you want to study in the UK?" I said, "Sure." So I was studying in the UK. She gave me some money, but there was no way that she could sustain me with my dad in the UK. They just didn't earn enough money. So then it was about me getting a job, because if I'm not getting a job, I'm not staying in the UK. And failure in my mind was never an option. So when you live in a mindset of failure is never an option, then you'll do whatever it takes. Same with SalesForge. It's our first ever startup. We'll do whatever it takes we'll make it. There's no way we're not making it. And if your mindset of failure is never an option, then that drives you, and that teaches you skills, and it teaches you communication skills, interpersonal skills. It teaches you how to talk to people, how to convince them, how to make them do things, from working in the Subway or working in the restaurant, where in a restaurant, for example, which was my second best paid job after sales, is you look after people and you're providing them great service, and they reward you with a tip. It's like commission sales. So it drives you to provide great service, be a great communicator. And ultimately, tips, or you could say, tips have taught me how to be great communicator, in restaurants and bars, etc., nightclubs and all that stuff. Getting rewarded essentially in tips is one way to answer this.
Okay.
Because it's a financial mechanism that's behind that, right? And I was poor, right? Which drives your inner desire to improve aggressively. So, yeah.
That's true. That's true. So like you touched about the hiring and firing part. So I would like to ask, like, what has been your best hire so far? And what has been the worst hire so far? Someone tried to fill the forge.
So I mean, the worst hire. I mean, you could call him the worst at SalesForge right now. The worst hire was the one that got fired yesterday.
And how, like,
Somehow this is very timely, you know. You timed it very well, Jahid, by the way.
but like, how do you fire people? You know, kind of like, what's the process? And like, what do you tell them?
So when you join, so the process of joining SalesForge. So we have some jobs in mind. They're never online. People can get jobs. People can literally send me a cold email and apply. With their if they're exceptionally well in some particular thing, they can apply literally by sending me an email. What's called open jobs. There's no JD, there's no job description, nothing you can apply. When we talk to individuals, and we literally do like 1, 2, maybe 3 max interviews, that's all we're gonna do. What we're looking for is 80% conviction. 80% conviction that this person will do what we call good damage. They will make impact in that particular area, right? And there's millions of areas that we need people in. The problem is we can't find really good, exceptional people, meaning they may not have the experience. We don't need experience necessarily. We need the drive because we're trying to predict whether they're going to be good in this particular job. A lot of people that join SalesForge have never done their jobs in the past. And that's fine. We just need you to be exceptionally good at this job that you're just going to do right now. And so how do we measure people just generally? And we do that throughout the probation period, etc. But I'm going to go into that in a bit. But generally speaking, when a person comes and joins SalesForge, that 3 months period, the probation period, we look at it as a test drive, the trial period. And essentially, by the end of the trial period of 3 months, by default, an individual doesn't pass probation period by default. So we have to build a business case internally to let that person pass probation. And if somebody in the leadership team does not agree that the person passes probation period, they do not pass. There's 2 options. Either you exit, which is the typical one, or we extend probation period. But we do not, by default, pass probation period until because the first 50 employees are super critical for your business to make it happen. And then later you can hire managers. We have no managers at SalesForge. They're literally 3 co-founders and 40 people, fully autonomous humans. So how do you hire autonomous humans? Well, you need to give them clear frameworks, guidance, support, onboarding, and everything, right? So they feel equipped, empowered, and they feel like the CEOs of their own turf. They need to follow guidance. That guidance is, we have 4 pillars internally that we communicate at all times. Pillar number 1 is performance. You have set clear KPIs that you need to achieve. They need to tell me how they're going to look to achieve them. What is the plan, execution, timelines, etc. I look at the plan, I review it, I approve it, make some comments. And that's all I do. I don't do one-to-ones, by the way, with employees, unless they request a one-to-one. So we don't even do one-to-ones internally, just to give you an idea. That's pillar 1, performance. Focus on performance. Now, to have the performance, you need the competence. That's pillar 2, the competence pillar. So people join at this competence level. And yes, maybe they're not that competent in this job, but there's conviction when we interview them. Damn, they could run very fast in this job. They could be really good at this. What we're looking for is the accelerated velocity in competence. It's what's called hyper velocity in learning. You learn so well. You're like a sponge. I tell you something, you implement it immediately. You never ask me questions again. Just to give an idea, you know? I don't have to repeat you 10 times. There's some people, you repeat them 10 times and they still don't get it. You don't want to be that person. You want to be the person where you learn, not just what I tell you, not other tell you, etc. You also need to be this self-troubleshooter. You need to know how to use Google, Perplexity, ChatGPT to solve your own problems before you go and bother other people. You need to learn how to do that. It's a skill. You know, when I used to work at Google, a customer would call me up and said, Frank, this doesn't work. And I was like, did you Google it? No. Could you please Google and call me back? Like that's Google used to tell us to do that because all these people would call up and would waste our time. When the answer is in Google, why are you calling us up? Actually, it's much faster for you to Google than going through the call lines in Google. So So that's pillar 2, competence. Pillar 3 is commitment. So you need to be very committed. Sometimes you're competent and you can drive performance, but you're like, you're kind of lazy. You don't want to do work. You're just like, you're lingering around. You're not really committed. You feel like you don't want to be here, essentially. So you need to be committed to yourself. You're coming into work on time. You're crushing. You're doing your deliverables, activities. Everything's perfect. It's happening. You're pumped every day. You're getting to work. So that's commitment. And you need to be committed to yourself, to your team, and to the company. There are 3 levels of commitment that we expect from every employee.
That's awesome.
And then the final one is culture. That's kind of obvious one. We're looking from more of a culture add rather than culture fit. So culture add meaning we're looking for different perspectives that people bring into the business, and it becomes like a cultural melting pot, just like in my days at Google or other companies that do that. So right now, with 40 employees or so, we have over 20 nationalities already by now, just to give you an idea.
Okay.
So yeah.
So last questions. It's like the last part of the episode. Hopefully short answers as well. So like you seem to be always, online, always busy, always selling, building. And also now like we are recording this in Easter holiday and like you're flying to Singapore for a conference. So when do you rest and when do you chill?
Good question. So a lot of people probably think that work is work and life is life. To me, work and life is like a blended concept, essentially. And essentially doing work for me is a hobby. It's like playing a video game. Think of it this way. You should be doing a job in your life where you get constantly, every single minute, dopamine hit. Essentially, for me, I'm getting dopamine hit when I do 10, 20 meetings a day, every day. I'm so pumped still by midnight. I do 10 a.m. to midnight every day, Monday to Friday. And I'm still pumped at midnight. Sometimes I have a hard time to sleep till like 3 a.m. What the problem lies is that people perceive a job as a job rather than more of a hobby, more of a video game. Once you're in that mindset, it's not a job anymore. This is fun. This is relaxation. You can feel this.
Yeah. Like where do you get this drive?
So you get a drive by the fact that I even speak to you, you're getting the drive. So the fact that essentially I speak to prospects, essentially I have these like 10, 20 demos or whatever other meetings I have in a day, that gives me the drive. That actually speaking to people, it gives me the energy. Whereas other people get exhausted. So you need to figure out how to get yourself in a state of constant dopamine mode. And if you're in that state of mind, you're unstoppable. And if you're unstoppable, then you'll make it.
That's great. And do you have some methods just to switch off for a bit and spend time with your?
Yeah, weekends. Even that is challenging sometimes. Even work during the weekends as well. So yeah. So I think it definitely super rad. I'm actually at home Monday to Friday. Yesterday I was actually somehow surprisingly. That's because I'll have to leave today to Singapore. Typically, the wife and the kids, they're mega busy anyway till like 8 p.m. Like super busy. They have a lot going on. They have they're like in the routine. We essentially do division of labor. We've decided back in the days with me and my missus that she's going to take care after the kids, like more of a full-time thing, Monday to Friday, than me dabbling. The fact that I'm dabbling into the process, into the workflow of picking up kids, actually is worse than like she wants to do it herself. Mm-hmm. And that sort of division of labor ensures efficiency. That means I can just go into work, do my work, come back, and all nice and dandy. Yeah, you typically definitely, naturally connect with the family and everything during the weekend. That's typically the more of the downtime, not 100% downtime, but more than that. I work on my phone a lot. I think a lot of people don't realize. I don't know how much work I do, but I'll do a lot of work on the fact that I have my phone, I can do, I think 70-80% of the work that I can do on a laptop. I can do a lot of work. So I don't need a laptop. I can just literally, even when I'm driving, even to work, I'm doing my work on my phone. The way that I'm doing it, I'm sending a voice note to my prospect.
Yeah,
or video, or you name it, like always, like I just called ABS, always be selling. Whatever it is that you're selling to the VCs, to the prospects, if you're in constant mode of always be selling, and that gives you the dopamine hit, you keep on going.
I love that. I love that. Like we chat sometimes on LinkedIn. Is it you or is it AI? Because like we chat sometimes midnight, sometimes day, late. So is it like really you or like do you use some AI just to respond to
this question? I get every day nearly from prospects, because they also, when they submit a form, if you're gonna go to the website and you're gonna submit your whatever the sign up form,
you may get a ping from me literally within a minute or two. And then, yes, of course, then you get a question. Is this a real guy, or is this the agent? Right? I'm not getting it. Why when this happened, then I'm in touch already, right? That is what's called sales service, or SLAs, rather, service level agreements, where you're on the ball at all times with everybody. Even if you're going to check out my LinkedIn profile, I'm going to sometimes say, hey, Jahid, how's it going? I'm watching you. I'm not stalking, I'm watching you. But the fact that even if you're going to enter my LinkedIn profile, I may say hi to you. That's what I do,
That's
I'm
nice.
always hunting for opportunities for networking, business. And I think that's what every founder should be. I don't get why not. In the US, it's a very normal thing, by the way, in the US. But it's something that the Europeans still haven't learned properly. It's still something they should be learning like hardcore. They should be going to some proper sales school. I don't understand why it's just me, in Europe. There's a few others, but I mean, it's, versus US is it's like day and night, essentially. But definitely, people have to be hardcore trained, going through some sales hardcore boot camps in Europe to update game. They're like miles off from where the Americans are.
So kind of like, I'm sure that kind of like SalesForge will go through several kind of, level of growth in the coming years. And you're pure, sales guy, like visionary behind SalesForge. So kind of like, do you see yourself still the CEO in some years, or kind of do you want to be, this visionary and the salesperson, even if not being the CEO? So, or kind of like, how do you envision the future of SalesForge?
We're making jokes. I'll be the chairman, Frank. So I can be the chairing. Somebody else can be the CEO if they want to. Like, I don't have to be the CEO necessarily. So if somebody else wants to be the CEO, good luck. If you can do a better job than I can, go for it. I would love to. Somebody would do even a better job than I would. I don't mind. Sometimes investors will ask you, Frank, if there's a moment in time where somebody else will need to step in, are you okay with that? I said, sure. If they're doing a better job than I would love to. I'm happy to be again the VP sales, or I don't know, whatever else like I could do. I can do a lot of things. So it's good to be very skilled and switching seats as you need to switch, right? Right now I'm doing the job that nobody else can. Plus, I have not yet met a person that could do a better job than I can in the CEO seat right now. But never say never. Of course, you can meet people and things change over time. And whatever is best for the company, that's what you need to do as a founder. That's my perception for the company and for its for its employees, for its customers. I'm a big believer that you need to do the thing that needs to be done for the greatness of for the betterment ultimately of everybody, right?
Yeah. Because my last question, like I have been to so many of your keynote sessions where you talk a lot and gave golden pieces of how to sell and some great tips to the entrepreneurs. So my last question is that if you have some, hardcore tips for the entrepreneurs who want to sell, who want to grow, kind of like what would be, 3 or 4 kind of most important tips for them just to focus on building sales, whatever you see it kind of, making them win.
So, I mean, some things will sound obvious, but like in the early days, if you're talking about really pre-seed kind of stage, like you're working 7 days a week without complaining and whining and taking time off. First year or two, you have to do that. Like no questions asked. You have to be working your ass off. And with people wondering what means working my ass off, as a CEO, meaning the non-technical co-founder, you do 10 to 20 meetings in a day without whining or anything. You have to plow your calendar with so many meetings with potential customers. That's your job to do. Because ultimately, startup world is very simple. Somebody needs to build, somebody needs to sell. You just need a 10x engineer and 10x salesperson. If you have a 10x salesperson, 10x engineer, things will pan out. Like that's how I look at it. So if you suck at sales, you figure out very fast how to not suck at sales. Go speak to other people that are very good at ramping their companies in their early days. I got that other founders coming to me, for example, time to time. I don't have a lot of time, but there's a lot of other founders that are great founders. Go and speak to them for some 15 minutes. Ask very specific questions that you want to ask. But you never stop. You never stop. You never rest. You learn to get into what I call the zone of pure focus, dopamine. Every day you have deliverables. If you finish a day where you feel like you haven't improved by 1%, it's a waste. Forget everything that you're doing. Reset. Like a lot of people just wasting their time. I see a lot of people, by the way, wasting. I don't tell them. I don't want to demotivate them, but I can see they're wasting their time. That's why a lot of startup founders just fail. You don't see what's called true progress. You need to see true progress in your startup. Are you actually moving? Is there movement on the product front, on the pipeline front? Is that momentum, that excitement? Guys, we just got an answer from our prospect. Is that like one prospect? And then 2 prospects. And guys, every day we're getting 10 replies. Awesome. Then 100 replies. Right now I do 500 plus demos in a month across my team of 3 salespeople. That's a lot of demos. You need to get to that. It takes time to build up, but it's being what's called relentless. And so talking to founders, like, you're feeding, knowledge of others, building your LinkedIn feed where you follow very smart people on LinkedIn that give you free knowledge, free advice on LinkedIn, feeding of them, following your competitors. Everybody has competitors. Follow them. Know your competitors better than they do, right? When you jump on a call with a customer, it feels like you know so much about the market, the competitor, etc. They pick you. It's because you sound like a subject matter expert, not just like, hey, here's my software. Everybody says that, here's my software, buy my software. But if you know the whole market, including the competitors, and you speak like a consultant, and yes, sometimes it's not a fit, but you sound like a consultant more like than some software guy, you're a very different league, right? Be that, trusted advisor kind of, the perception should be your trusted advisor, right? So, I mean, I would say people just suck at sales skills, like, honestly. Like, that's why they don't make it. So they have to, they definitely have to train themselves up. I think if you want to, read a book, like Never Split the Difference, for example. We're also writing a book, by the way. So, but that's also something that we're doing. It's going to be released by I think in June, in July or something. But, so read a book. Never Split the Difference will be one example of a book you should read. Then what else is there? If you need to follow some interesting people, there's a lot of very, very smart salespeople on the internet. Josh Brown is one of them. If you want to think about kind of strategies in acquisition, etc., go and watch some stuff from Alex Hormozy, for example. But if every week you're not consuming knowledge, again, you're wasting your time. Because typically most founders just suck at selling and go to market. By default, like, just assume by default, they just suck. So if you just by default suck, then try to unsuck, so as in go and just binge watch Alex Hormozy. Go and just read the book, like speed run this during the weekend. Never Split the Difference. Just pure focus, pure execution, consume so much knowledge and upgrade yourself so that after a week or 2, you're like next level. You need to get next level ASAP. Because in startup world, you don't have the time. Time is money. So invest into yourself so that you give a good chance for a company to survive and thrive and go faster. That's what needs to happen. And a lot of founders just don't get it. Sometimes it's really good. I mean, for some people, they need a mentor as well. So,
did you have or do you have a mentor?
Actually, no. I'm this weird guy that never had a mentor. I don't know. So, right, did you ever have a mentor? I was like, no, never needed one. I don't know. Kind of weird. I don't typically mentor either. Some people ask for a session or 2. Sure, grab me with me lunch, and that's the best mentor. That's the best lunch you're gonna have in your life, I guess. I don't know, best mentor. The most important thing that could kill you is you would give, like, never give up, first of all, right? But you need to kind of, get the energy from somebody or advice from somebody, or potentially kind of discuss just with somebody. Let's call it, have a founder buddy. Let's go that way. That you can sort of, work with, cry your shoulder on cry on his shoulder or something. And that's a ritual you want to have at a particular frequency, because you need this, little support network, and especially in this part of the world. But the problem is, in this part of the world, there's not too many strong founders altogether. I think that is the biggest issue.
Yeah. Lots of great pieces of tips and insights. And this is why I'm doing this podcast, kind of like learning from the founders, like lots of great things. Thank you so much, Frank, for doing this. It was a lot of fun again. Yeah. And hope to see you soon in person.
Yes, no worries. Thanks. I'll go.